Have you ever looked back at something you did and thought, why did I do that, even though I knew better? Or maybe you've watched someone repeat the same pattern in love, friendships, or work, and you wondered why they never learn. Maybe you felt a strong emotional reaction to someone, and then later realized the reaction was bigger than the situation. Jung would say those moments are not random, and they are not just weakness or lack of discipline, because they are often the unconscious mind revealing what the conscious mind does not want to see. Most people like the idea that they are rational, self-aware, and intentional, but human behavior does not really work like that. We are influenced by fears we do not admit, desires we do not understand, and memories we do not fully remember. We react before we think. We defend ourselves before we listen. We chase approval even when we say we do not care. Jung believed that beneath our everyday personality lies a wider inner world, and that inner world is powerful enough to shape decisions, relationships, and even the way we interpret reality. If you want to understand human behavior, you have to understand what is happening behind the scenes, because the loudest forces in the mind are often the ones we do not notice. Jung described the unconscious as a vast part of the psyche that holds everything we have not fully processed or integrated. It includes emotions we have pushed down, traits we have rejected, and experiences we have not made meaning from. This is where behavior becomes interesting, because the unconscious does not stay silent just because we ignore it. It expresses itself through patterns, impulses, and reactions. It shows up when someone says, "I do not know why I get so angry. I do not know why I keep choosing the same kind of partner." Or, "I do not know why I sabotage things when they start going well." From a Jungian perspective, these are not just personality flaws, because they can be signals that something inside is trying to be recognized. A difficult truth is that what we refuse to face in ourselves does not disappear. It often returns as behavior. Think about the moments when you feel emotionally hijacked. Someone says something small and it hits a nerve, and suddenly your tone changes, your body tightens, and you become defensive or cold. Why does that happen? Jung would say that the reaction is not only about what was said, it is about what it touched. It touched a fear, a wound, a belief, or an old memory that has been living in you sometimes for years. This is why two people can experience the same event and react completely differently. Behaviour is not only about what is happening now, it is also about what the present moment awakens inside you. To make sense of human behaviour on a larger scale, Jung introduced the idea of archetypes. Archetypes are universal patterns, roles, and images that exist across cultures and across time. They show up in myths, stories, religion, movies, and daily life. They're not rigid labels, but they are familiar inner templates, and they influence how we see ourselves and how we relate to others. You can notice archetypes in the way people instinctively respect certain leaders, admire certain heroes, fear certain villains, or feel drawn to certain personalities. Sometimes we fall for a person not only because of who they are, but because of what they represent to our inner world. Sometimes we obey someone not only because they have authority, but because they trigger a deep pattern in us that associates authority with safety, or with danger, or with approval. This matters because a lot of human behaviour is not just personal, it is symbolic. People often behave as if they are playing roles they did not consciously choose. Someone becomes the caretaker in every relationship and feels guilty when they rest. Someone becomes the performer and feels empty when they are not praised. Someone becomes the rebel and feels trapped when life becomes stable. Someone becomes the achiever and feels worthless without results. Jung would say these roles can be expressions of archetypal energy, and the danger is not having an archetype, the danger is being possessed by it. When you do not know the role you are acting out, you start to believe the role is your identity. When that happens, behaviour becomes repetitive, and growth becomes difficult because you are living inside a script you did not write. Now we come to one of Jung's most powerful ideas about human behaviour, which is the shadow. The shadow is the part of ourselves that we reject, deny, or hide. It includes traits we were taught were unacceptable, emotions we were punished for, and impulses we learned to feel ashamed of. The shadow is not only evil or violent, although it can include aggression, envy, selfishness, or cruelty. The shadow can also include positive qualities we disowned, like confidence, assertiveness, ambition, sensuality, and independence, especially if those qualities were judged in our environment. The shadow is basically everything in you that you decided you are not allowed to be. Here is where human behavior becomes very clear. If you deny parts of yourself, those parts do not simply vanish, they tend to leak out indirectly. They appear as projections. Projection is when you see in others what you cannot accept in yourself. This is why the traits that trigger you most in other people can be clues about what is unresolved in you. If someone's confidence enrages you, it might be because you were taught it is dangerous to stand out. If someone's selfishness disgusts you, it might be because you never learned how to prioritize yourself without guilt. If someone's vulnerability annoys you, it might be because you had to be strong too early. Jung would say, "We do not see the world as it is, we often see the world as we are." Projection shapes relationships more than most people realize. Many conflicts are not only about what happened, but about what is being projected onto the other person. Sometimes we argue with someone as if they are our past, not our present. Sometimes we fear someone leaving, not because they are leaving, but because abandonment lives inside us. Sometimes we demand reassurance, not because the other person is unloving, but because our nervous system is still living in old uncertainty. When the shadow is active, you can be in the same room with someone and still not really see them, because you are interacting with your own inner material, reflected outward. This is also why people can behave cruelly while believing they are good. When the shadow is unconscious, it can come out as passive aggression, superiority, moral outrage, and humiliation of others. It can look like someone who says they care about truth, but actually wants power. It can look like someone who says they value loyalty, but uses guilt to control. It can look like someone who says they are honest, but uses honesty as a weapon. The mind is very skilled at protecting its self-image. And Jung's point was not to shame people for having a shadow, but to warn that the more you deny it, the more it runs your life without your permission. At this point, you might be thinking, if so much of behaviour is unconscious, does that mean we are helpless? Jung's answer would be no, but it does mean that freedom requires awareness. A person who is unaware is not neutral. They are predictable. They repeat what they have not understood. They defend what they have not healed. They seek what they have not given themselves. So the parts of you that you refuse to meet will keep introducing themselves through your choices. You can call it fate or bad luck or patterns, but from a Jungian view, it is your psyche trying to become whole. This leads to Jung's idea of individuation. Individuation is the process of becoming a more integrated and whole person. It is not about becoming perfect, and it is not about getting rid of darkness. It is about bringing unconscious material into consciousness, so you can live with more honesty and less self-deception. It is the gradual movement from being driven by automatic patterns to being guided by inner understanding. Individuation is the work of facing yourself, not the version of yourself you post, not the version you perform, not the version you used to survive, but the full human reality of you. This is why Jung's psychology connects so strongly to human behaviour, because behaviour changes when self-perception changes. If you believe you're unlovable, your behaviour will often seek proof, even if that proof hurts. You might overgive to earn love, or undercommit to avoid rejection, or choose unavailable people because it confirms your belief. If you believe conflict equals abandonment, your behaviour will avoid honest conversations, and you will call it peace. If you believe your worth depends on achievement, your behaviour will chase goals that never satisfy you, and you will call it ambition. Jung would say that the unconscious beliefs you carry act like invisible instructions, and your behaviour follows instructions you did not know you accepted. So how do you apply this in real life without turning it into a vague self-help message? You start by observing your patterns without immediately defending them. You notice what keeps repeating. You pay attention to the moments you feel most reactive, most insecure, most controlling, or most desperate for validation. Then ask yourself a question. What is this really about? What part of me is trying to protect me right now? People often judge their own behaviour too quickly, but Jung would encourage curiosity, because curiosity makes room for integration. When you look at your behaviour as information rather than identity, you stop saying, "I'm broken," and you start saying, "Something in me needs attention." You cannot heal what you keep calling normal. If you keep calling your anxiety personality, your resentment strength, your avoidance independence, your numbness calmness, and your people-pleasing kindness, then you will keep behaving from those places and wonder why life feels so heavy. Jung would say that maturity is not the absence of struggle, it is the willingness to face the inner truth that your outer life is expressing. Remember, your triggers are not only problems, they are messages. They point toward the parts of you that are still asking to be understood. When you see someone acting out, you can ask, what are they protecting? What are they afraid of? What do they need control over? And what do they not want to feel? This does not mean you tolerate harmful behaviour, but it helps you see that behaviour often comes from inner fragmentation. The person who constantly criticises might be trying to manage their own shame. The person who always dominates might be trying to avoid vulnerability. The person who refuses intimacy might be defending against loss. Jung's perspective can make you less surprised by human behaviour, because you start to understand that people do not only act from logic, they act from their inner history. Let's bring this together into one simple idea you can carry after this video. From a Jungian perspective, human behaviour is often the visible surface of invisible inner dynamics. If you want to change behaviour, you do not start by forcing yourself to be different through willpower alone. You start by making the unconscious conscious, because when you understand why a pattern exists, you stop needing to repeat it in the same way. The goal is not to become someone else. It is to become more of who you actually are, without denial, without performance, and without living at war with your own psyche. As you reflect on your own life, here are a few questions you can sit with. What patterns keep showing up in your relationships, even when the person changes? What do you judge most harshly in others? And what does that say about what you have rejected in yourself? What emotions do you avoid feeling? And what behaviours do you use to avoid them? Where in your life do you feel like you're acting a role, and what would happen if you stopped acting it? These are not questions you answer in one night, but they are the kind of questions that slowly change the way you live, because they turn behaviour into self-knowledge. Many people spend years trying to control their behaviour while never listening to the part of them that is driving it. But when you begin to listen honestly, your life becomes less about constant struggle and more about understanding. You become less reactive and more responsible. You become less performative and more real. And that is the point, because the more you know yourself, the less your unconscious has to speak through chaos. If this video made you think of a specific pattern in your own life, do not rush to judge it. Just notice it and stay curious, because awareness is where change begins.